We asked Earth for supplies. They sent medicine, engineers, and a fleet on standby. Commander Zix-471 stared at the incoming transmission from Earth with all four of his optical sensors focused in disbelief. The Kepler station crisis had been escalating for 3 standard cycles now. Life support failing, hull breaches spreading like infection through the outer rings, and the hegemony's own rescue vessels still weeks away from the remote research outpost. In desperation, the Trilaxian High Command had sent a simple request to their newest allies: basic medical supplies and perhaps some technical expertise. The humans had only recently joined the Galactic Alliance, barely 2 rotations since first contact, and were still considered primitive by most civilized species. Their technology lagged behind the standard by several centuries. Their ships were crude, and their diplomatic corps spoke with an almost childlike directness that made seasoned negotiators wince. But they were the closest inhabited system to Kepler Station. "Sir," Communications Officer Vel 229 chittered nervously. "The human response is unusual." Zix-471's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Define unusual, officer." "They're not sending supplies, Commander. They're sending people. And ships. Many ships." The main display flickered to life, showing the human fleet that had materialized. At the edge of the system barely 6 hours after receiving the distress call, 17 vessels of varying sizes hung in formation, their designs looking almost deliberately inefficient compared to the sleek curves of standard galactic architecture. They were bulky, angular things covered in what appeared to be armor plating and bristling with communication arrays. "Kepler Station, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Emergency Response Fleet. We've received your medical and engineering request. Permission to begin immediate evacuation and repair operations?" Zix-471's translator struggled with the human's rapid, clipped speech pattern. "Evacuation? We requested supplies, not—" "Commander." Chen's voice carried an odd warmth that the translator couldn't quite process. "With respect, when someone calls for help, humans don't send boxes. We send people." What followed defied every protocol. Zix-471 knew about interspecies aid operations. Instead of the standard bureaucratic dance of resource allocation and territorial negotiations, the human ships simply acted. Medical frigates docked with the failing station sections, disgorging. Teams of human medics who immediately began treating the injured without regard for species or rank. Their equipment was primitive but effective. Where Trilaxian medicine required complex biomatrix analyzers, humans seemed to work with intuitive understanding and improvised solutions. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human medical team leader, moved through the station's medical bay with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. She treated a Zephyrian engineer's plasma burns with some kind of gel that shouldn't have worked on silicon-based physiology, but did. She jury-rigged a breathing apparatus for a Trilaxian worker using spare parts from a food processor. When asked how she knew such adaptations would work, she simply shrugged and said, "Trauma medicine is universal. Pain is pain." But it was the engineering response that truly bewildered Zix-471. The human chief engineer, a grizzled man named Martinez, took one look at the cascading systems failures and immediately began what he called aggressive troubleshooting. Instead of requesting technical specifications or conducting proper analysis, he and his team started pulling panels and rerouting systems with an intuitive understanding that made no mathematical sense. "Your power distribution network is fighting itself," Martinez explained to the station's Trilaxian engineers, his hands already deep in a control panel that should have required authorization to access. "You've got 17 different safety protocols that are preventing emergency repairs. We're going to bypass about 12 of them." "The safety protocols exist for crew protection," stammered Chief Engineer Kyle 881. Martinez paused, wiping metallic fluid from his hands. "Son, safety protocols are for when everything's working. When everything's broken, safety comes from getting things working again." He gestured to his team, who were already splicing power conduits with tools that looked like they'd been improvised from scrap metal. "My people have been fixing impossible things in impossible places for centuries. Trust us." Within 8 hours, the Kepler station's primary systems were not just functional, but running at higher efficiency than they had in cycles. The humans had apparently redesigned half the power grid while repairing it, implementing improvements that the original designers had never considered. But perhaps most disturbing to Zix-471 was the presence of those other ships, the ones that hadn't docked, that maintained position at the system's edge like sleeping predators. "Admiral," he finally asked during a brief communication break, "those vessels maintaining distance, are they cargo ships?" Chen's expression shifted slightly, and for a moment her warm demeanor showed something harder underneath. "Those are warships, Commander. Heavy cruisers, battle frigates, and a dreadnought. But at Kurdimers we requested medical aid and engineering support." "Yes, you did." Chen's voice remained steady. "And we sent doctors and engineers. But Commander, we've learned that sometimes the universe doesn't care about your good intentions. Sometimes, help arrives just in time for someone else to try taking it away." As if summoned by her words, the long-range sensors detected movement at the system's outer boundary. 3 ships bearing hegemon military signatures were accelerating toward the station, not the rescue vessels that had been promised, but something far more predatory. Zix-471 felt his circulatory system spike with adrenaline. "Admiral, those are Corvin raiders. They must have intercepted our distress calls. They'll try to salvage the station for themselves." Chen's smile was a thing that would haunt Zix-471's dreams. It wasn't cruel exactly, but it held a weight of history that his translator couldn't begin to process. "Commander, those raiders are about to learn something important about humans." She touched a control on her command chair. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Defensive posture around Kepler Station. Make it clear we're not leaving." The human warships moved with fluid precision, their earlier appearance of crude inefficiency revealed as masterful deception. They formed a barrier between the station and the approaching raiders that radiated such quiet menace that the Corvin ships actually decelerated. Hours later, after the raiders had withdrawn without firing a shot, Zix-471 found himself in the station's restored command center, watching the human fleet prepare to depart. The medical teams had saved 37 lives. The engineers had not only repaired the station, but left detailed improvement plans for future implementation. The warships had prevented what could have been a devastating attack without firing a single shot. "Admiral Chen," he transmitted, "the Trilaxian High Command will want to understand your protocol for aid operations. How do we properly request assistance in the future?" Chen's image on the view screen showed that warm expression again, tinged, now with something that might have been amusement. "Commander, here's what you need to understand about humans. When someone asks us for help, we don't send the minimum required. We don't send what's convenient. We send what's needed." She paused, and her next words would be quoted in galactic diplomatic manuals for generations to come. "We send doctors because healing matters. We send engineers because problems need solving. And we send warships because sometimes, Commander, the universe needs to know that good people aren't defenseless people." As the human fleet departed, Zix-471 understood that his species had gained more than an ally. They had encountered something unprecedented in galactic civilization, a species that responded to requests for help not with calculation, but with commitment. Not with the minimum viable aid, but with the maximum possible care. In his final report to High Command, Zix-471 would write, "Recommend immediate expansion of diplomatic ties with humanity. They are primitive in some ways, but possess sophisticated understanding of something we may have forgotten, the true meaning of alliance." The next time any alliance member called for help, they would know exactly who to contact. Not because humans had the best technology, but because they understood that when someone calls for help, you send everything necessary to ensure they never have to call again.